how do you define what the gig economy is?
It's a hard question.
Yeah.
It's changed a lot, right?
So how much does the average gig worker make? Do you know?
We help them provide the easiest way for them to onboard a gig worker, for them to pay a gig worker, for them to credential a gig worker, and for them to maintain continuous compliance for said gig worker.
Do you have something that you'd say was a loss in your career, in your entrepreneurial career?
I turn everything into a learning, but there's definitely been a ton of losses, right? Like I think I turn it into a learning, and I think a loss is only a loss if you don't learn from it, right? I wake up every day just feeling blessed to do what I'm doing. Hi, I'm David, the CEO of Gigsafe, and you're watching Truck and Hustle.
So we're going to talk about, obviously, Gigsafe, what you're doing for the gig economy and what you're doing for people who support the gig economy. But I want to start with that word, the gig economy. How do you define what the gig economy is? Because we hear that word a lot in culture. So how do you define it?
It's a hard question.
Yeah.
It's changed a lot, right? So I guess it ties, the evolution of that, I think, ties a little bit to sort of my own personal career path.
Okay.
So I think when most people think gig economy, they think Uber or Lyft, right? And rewind back to 2015, I'd worked at Uber at the time, and I helped launch Uber in Las Vegas. And when people thought gig, they thought Uber or Lyft. Then you had sort of like DoorDash and Uber Eats come on the scene, right? So that sort of became gig. But I think really where we saw a big shift was probably during the pandemic, right? So when I'd worked at Uber, 20% of Uber drivers worked at Lyft. No one else worked at the food apps. A common thing I heard at the time was you'd hear from, when we launched Uber Eats, Uber drivers would say, hey, I ain't your pizza delivery boy. I don't want to do food delivery. COVID hit, everyone had to become a pizza delivery boy in that world. But I think what happened around that 2019, 2020, 2021 was just what I call sort of like the tidal wave of 1099 or tidal wave of gigs. So we saw it start to show up in last mile, pharmaceutical, e-commerce, marijuana delivery, right? All sorts of different things suddenly became gig. So taking a step back now, one thing that's surprising to me is, we have customers who deliver organs with 1099 drivers, right? Sort of in that gig model. So I think at least the way I really view it is a person working as an independent contractor, working across or, evaluating multiple different options. And I think where I see it going is more and more almost this like professionalization of gig, right? So I think it continues to evolve. What do you think?
I like that. I like the way you put that. But so how large is the gig economy? Give me some numbers.
It's hard to nail down.
Okay.
Right. So if you look at some of like the official statistics, you'll say, hey, independent contracting as a whole is like a third of the U.S. workforce or something. But that involves a lot of, there's a difference between independent contractor and gig, I would say.
Yeah.
So on the flip side, if you look at sort of like Department of Labor, Department of Transportation, they'll say the number's really low, right? Because that's people who self-reported, et cetera. So it's hard to pin down, but in my mind, it's call it the 10 million folks or so, probably. Okay.
So you asked me what I think. When I think of gig economy, I think of people who are looking for flexibility, who don't want to be tied down to a traditional 9-to-5 job. They want to have the flexibility of working for multiple people and themselves at the same time.
Yep.
And I think that's it. I think those are like the three things that I really think about. Like that's what the gig economy is, right? These people who are looking for just like opportunities to just make money that's non-traditional.
If you're still waiting days to get paid after a load, you're hustling backwards. Let me put you on the LOADPAY. LOADPAY is a digital bank account built specifically for truck drivers. It's the fastest way to get paid from over 400 brokers and 60 plus factors. It helps you speed up your invoice payments, manage your cash flow, and pay for fuel and expenses, all from one place. No more chasing down reimbursements or fronting money out of pocket. With LOADPAY, your money hits quicker and you can spend straight from your LOADPAY debit account. When you link your account to the Triumph network, you get paid even faster. Your invoice payments will be deposited into your account in minutes, 24/7, including weekends and holidays. Plus, every dollar you track is a dollar you control, and that's how real businesses grow. So, if you're out here moving freight and building something real, LOADPAY is a tool you need in your toolbox. Head over to loadpay.com to learn more by clicking the link below. This is an ad sponsored by LOADPAY.
Yep.
Right, and just have some flexibility doing so.
I agree with that, flexibility on their terms.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so what is Gigsafe doing for the gig economy?
So we help companies that, two things. We help companies that engage 1099 workers, engage the 1099 workers the best way possible, right? So we help them provide the easiest way for them to onboard a gig worker, for them to pay a gig worker, for them to credential a gig worker, and for them to maintain continuous compliance for said gig worker. And then we package that all together and basically say, because of this continuous compliance, we use that to try and get better insurance rates for those companies. So really, we provide the easiest way for a gig company to engage a gig worker.
Okay. And why did you feel that this was a need?
If you asked me a couple of years ago, I wouldn't have thought it was a need. So I guess a bit of sort of my personal story was I previously founded a company called Para. This is sort of at the beginning of the pandemic. It was myself and my roommate. We were bored, decided to try and build a couple different tools for gig workers. So we built sort of a earnings tracking tool. We actually built like a walkie-talkie tool.
Okay.
But I think what we really stumbled on was we realized that, more and more gig workers were trying more and more apps, right? So the average gig worker had gone from working on, 1.1 apps to working on 4, 5, 6 apps. And I think we realized that, I'm sure, have you ever been in an Uber and there's like the two phones?
For sure, 100%.
They're sort of like, swiping and, doing that while driving.
Yeah.
Imagine that with like 6, 7, or 8 apps, right? And that's what we were starting to notice is a lot of folks were doing that. And I thought to myself, hey, that's something we can help, right? That's something a computer can solve. That should be pretty easy. We learned it wasn't that easy, but we basically built an app to say, hey, you should be able to connect all the places you get work into one feed, get it all into one place, and be able to set parameters.
Okay.
So you should be able to say, hey, I don't want to take anything under $2 a mile. I don't want to pick up from McDonald's. I don't want to take anything less than $10. I don't want to leave this geofence. I don't want to go to that zip code. And we just gave the independent contractors that power, basically saying, hey, if you're driving and you have 7 apps yelling at you, you just set what you want, and we'll help you only accept what you want.
Okay.
And that turned out to be pretty popular.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I've heard of Para before, never used it.
Yeah.
So basically, one app, it would integrate all the different apps out there, the DoorDashes, the Ubers of the world,
Yep.
one place. And then you said you could set parameters around the jobs that you want to do, the earnings that you want to make, just kind of different, like you said, parameters to, I guess, be successful at what you're doing.
Yeah, that was really the goal, just make it easier and put you in control of your work. Right?
Okay. And what was the outcome for that business?
So it proved pretty popular. At its peak, we had, call it 380,000 gig workers using it every week to manage their work. At one point, like a third of all active DoorDashers were using the system.
Wow.
And that was pretty cool, right? So I think we had all these users, and sort of as a team, we sort of asked ourselves, what do they care about, right? What do our users care about? What more can we do? And I think talking to all the users, it was quite obvious is these folks wanted to find other good work, right? So we set out to try and find that, right? So we thought to ourselves, what pays better than DoorDash? What pays better than Uber Eats? What's better than delivering Uber, right? So we went out and I went and talked to final mile delivery companies, pharmaceutical delivery companies, people who deliver food in a stadium, just anyone who needed gig workers, basically, and tried to find work that paid better. And we were able to find it, right? It turns out that delivering compound pharmaceuticals pays better than delivering food. But to get there, there was a whole set of requirements and credentials that were needed. So I was naive at the time. I'm a tech guy. So I thought, hey, we have all these workers with a profile. These companies need workers. I can just take the workers, plug them into the TMS, and they should just be able to start working, right?
Yeah.
That's really what we try to build, right? Is we'd go to folks and say, hey, how many drivers do you need in LA? And they'd be like, I need 100 drivers. And in LA, we had 10, 12, 13,000 drivers. I'm like, we have a ton of folks who want work. Here's 100.
Yeah.
And, I had, the drivers had created a profile with us. So we had the driver's license. We had the background check. We had a bunch of the different credentials ready. and I'd sort of come back a month later and be like, how's it going? You needed 100, we sent 100. 2 of them would be working. I'd be like, what do you mean 2 are working? They were ready to go. You needed them. We've already credentialed them. Like, why aren't they working? And I think what we ran into was a couple different things.
All right, y'all, quick word from our sponsor. Discover the hassle-free trailer leasing experience with Paramount Trailer Leasing, a family-owned business based out of the greater Fort Worth area. With more than 30 years of industry experience, they offer a range of high-quality trailers from flatbeds to dry vans and specialized models designed to meet all of your transportation needs. Enjoy flexible lease terms, competitive rates, and a same-day simple leasing process that requires no credit checks and guarantees trailers with no recap tires. Just fill out an online application, have your lease agreement prepared, receive a call to arrange pickup, sign the agreement, hook up, and get on the road all in one day. Visit ParamountTrailerLeasing.com today, and also you get free breaks for the lifetime of your lease just by mentioning Truck and Hustle. All right, y'all, let's go.
Just one, there were specific things that a driver would need to do to deliver an organ compared to delivering food. Specific insurance requirements, specific HIPAA training, all of those different steps. And the second thing we learned was most of these companies did it in a very manual process. So it was a human moving them through the process step by step, or they were using antiquated software. And after sort of a year or two of, we try to make those systems better. We would plug in, try to speed it up, try to make it better. And then after a year or two, basically decided, you know what, why don't we just build the system the way we think it should be? So that's really how we got to Gigsafe. So a bit of a winding path.
That's very interesting. So my first question is, how much does the average gig worker make? Do you know?
Same thing, because the definition is so broad, it's hard. But I think at least in the final mile space where we mostly play right now, I'd say 38 or 40,000 probably.
Okay, got it. So within under the Para umbrella, you guys were looking to figure out how you could serve the customer better.
Yep.
You had all these drivers, all these independent contractors who were working at the DoorDashes and so forth and so on. And you were like, where are some other opportunities where they can make more money?
Correct.
So you went out and you just beat the streets and found some other like courier type services and that you could just kind of find and bring to the platform. Was that the goal?
Yeah, that was. And it wasn't just courier. We had a couple interesting ones, right? So we had folks do merchandising. So that's, showing up at Target, counting the stock and, making sure that the product looked good on the shelf. Yeah. That would ended up being a pretty lucrative gig. A lot of the folks liked that too, because if you think about it, if you were already there doing an Instacart shop and you could get paid just to, sort out some cookies on the shelf, that's pretty good. We had another one, which is basically food delivery in a basketball stadium. People love that one because I'm still delivering food, but I get to watch an NBA game. That's pretty cool, right?
For sure.
And we had just all sorts of other 1099 work as well.
So how did you find these guys?
The companies?
Yeah, the companies. You had the drivers. How did you find the companies in all these like different verticals and these obscure niches, like you said, like delivering food to a stadium? Like, how would you find something like that?
Yeah, I think a lot of LinkedIn messaging.
Okay.
LinkedIn messaging, word of mouth, asking other people. And one of the big ones for us was actually asking the drivers. So have you heard of your friends working anywhere interesting? Who do you know is making good money and what are they doing? Right? Yeah.
And you said it was a very manual process for a lot of these different opportunities, right? Like,
yeah.
Okay. So explain like how they would do it previous to like connecting with you guys.
Yeah, I think there was sort of a bit of a disconnect, right? So you'd take a driver who's used to Uber or DoorDash and they're used to, hey, I can sign up in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Right? And it's a modern experience that can be done quickly. And for a lot of these companies that we worked with, they were purposefully slower, right? So you'd have some questionnaire, then you have to wait for somebody to reach out for you. Then they'd send you through some part of the onboarding flow, then you'd have to go to some in-person training. Then you'd have to wait for them to call you back. And it was just sort of like a slower process there. And I think especially once you started to add in, drug tests or other specific credentials that they had to take or trainings they had to take, it just really started to add up there. And so we saw conversion was just really bad, right? Because these were folks who were used to almost like instant gratification. And what I heard from a lot of these final mile companies is, the DoorDash, Uber drivers just aren't a fit for us. We move slower. We're looking for people who are purposeful. And I'd always sort of push back on that, being like, hey, I'm sure 70% of the folks might not be a fit, But a good driver is a good driver. They're smart, they're motivated, they have people skills, they want to do the work. Like, they probably are a good fit for you. And the way you're running your system, I call it like a hidden cost. If you have somebody who's really good, who wants to come do work for you, and because of a bad experience, you lose them, that's actually a big cost to your business.
For sure.
Because good drivers are hard to come by. And that's really sort of why we decided to start Gigsafe.
Okay, got it. And where would they typically find these drivers? Just like one ads? Like how would they find these drivers prior to using somebody like you?
A lot of it would be Indeed.
Indeed?
I would say.
Okay. They just post on Indeed and these opportunities, and somebody would just submit their resume and just try to get the job.
Yeah, I mean, if you go to Indeed and search delivery driver in any given city, you'd be shocked. There's, 700 results, 900 results, 400 results, even the smaller cities, 200-300 results.
Yeah.
But I always put it this way, is like, not a lot of drivers come home from driving 12 hours and are super psyched to go to page 4 on Indeed and fill out your application that takes 3 hours.
Yeah.
Right.
For sure. Okay. So then you got started with Gigsafe. When did you, so is Para still, what's going on with Para now?
Yeah, so we've sort of deep frozen it.
Okay.
Right.
What does that mean?
We shut down the app, but I have the goal to bring it back one day. Right.
Why did you shut it down?
I think what we realized is we built a product that the drivers loved and the companies that use us love, but frankly, we never found a good business model. And I also realized
To make money
on it. And I think the other one too is we realized that Gigsafe, even though it sounds really different, actually is a path towards the same end goal. So let me explain that. In that, like, really at the end in Para, what I was trying to do is say, hey, can I take any individual driver and help arm them with anything that they need to go find better work? Right? So can I take a food delivery driver and basically try to find them this better work? But I realized that what we're missing, can we provide them the commercial auto insurance? Can we provide them the HIPAA? Can we get them the dangerous goods training, dry ice handling, all of that different stuff?
Yeah.
And I realized, maybe naively, I thought I could force it from the driver side to the companies. If I had a mass of drivers, I could force companies to accept driver profiles and let them do the work. Gigsafe is sort of the opposite of that, right? So Gigsafe is, we provide the solution to the company, but really it's the same mission. I want to make it as easy as possible for a qualified driver to, basically bolt on whatever they need to find the best work. And the same thing for the companies, right? I want to help qualified companies win all the contracts they have by being able to add to them the systems and processes and insurance that they need to unlock any work there. So it sounds really different, but at the end of the day,
Same end goal.
Yeah, I think it's the same end goal.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Let's stop there before we move forward. I want to go back a little bit.
Yeah.
Why are you suited to solve this problem? Let's talk about your background a little bit.
Yeah, so I guess
and you can start wherever you want to start. You could start with where you grew up. Just tell me a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I was born and raised in Hong Kong, which
Hong Kong.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have guessed that.
People usually don't.
How'd your family make it to Hong Kong?
So my grandpa was from a small town in Kansas, joined sort of the military in World War II. Because of his time, was in the military for a while afterwards. And because of that, he actually ended up getting sent to Asia a bunch. So my dad was born and raised in Oakland in California. But strangely, he would spend 1 year in Oakland, 1 year in Thailand, 1 year in Oakland, 1 year in Indonesia, 1 year in Oakland, 1 year, every other year was spent over in Asia.
Yeah.
Because my grandpa was military and he got sent to all the strange places.
Okay.
Basically. So my dad spent every other year there growing up. So he sort of moved there and worked there after college. So I was born and raised there.
Raised to what age?
Till I was 18.
18.
Yeah.
So how's the school system? Is it similar to the U.S. school system? High school?
Somewhat. I went to a British school growing up. What was weird with Hong Kong was we were a British colony until 1997. So I grew up swearing allegiance to the Queen, painting pictures of her on her birthday. It's sort of crazy when you think about that, right? It's really not.
I don't mean to laugh.
Right? No, it's crazy, right?
Painting pictures of the Queen.
I wish I could be making that up, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
That's pretty interesting. Okay. So that's what I didn't know that. I didn't know that you painted pictures to the Queen and pledged your allegiance in Hong Kong.
Until 1997, we're a straight up colony. So.
Okay. So that's what you grew up doing. And then, tell me about how you matriculate into what? High school is next after? How does it work?
Yes, I came to the States for college. I went to Harvard. I studied government. I realized I wanted nothing to do with the government. And sort of after graduation, took a job at a casino, interestingly.
Okay.
Right. So,
Now, real quick, was your education very rigorous in Hong Kong? Because I've heard in the Asian communities, like the education is just a lot more rigorous than like the States. So would you say that? Is that fair to say?
I'd say so, but I was sort of lucky that I always had sort of parents who are like, hey, as long as you
Just
if you
do your thing, it's all good.
Exactly.
Okay, got it. All right, so we'll get off of that. Moving, you said you went to Harvard.
Yeah.
All right, what did you study?
Government. I at first wanted to study economics, then I realized that involved a lot of math.
Okay. Why government? Like, what were you trying to get into the public sector? Like, what was your goal?
I thought it was interesting, so I studied particularly like Chinese international relations.
Okay, you gonna be a spy?
I should have been. No. But
Okay. Yeah. So you graduated with a degree in what?
Government.
Government.
Well, they call it government. It's political science.
Political science. Okay, got it. And then what was your first job out of college?
Went and worked at a casino.
How'd that work out? How'd that happen?
They recruited me out of college, and it was a casino based in Las Vegas. They owned the Venetian and Palazzo in Las Vegas, but they also owned a bunch of casinos over in Asia. So I did sort of investor relations for them. So I would like talk to Wall Street and try to explain why our stock should go up, basically.
Okay. Tell me a little bit about working in a casino. Was it a good experience for you?
It was great. I got to travel the world. They sent me to Singapore to look at our casinos, sent me to Macau to look at the casinos. I really liked the job, but I think what was tough is we had the guy who owned the company was, 85 years old. So to him, the 55-year-olds were like young men. I was like a 22-year-old with a bunch of ideas, and the 55-year-olds were young men. So I just, it wasn't the right place for me.
Okay, and how long did you stay there?
2.5 years.
2.5 years. And then what was next for you?
I got super lucky, right? So I got LinkedIn's been good for me. I got a LinkedIn message out of nowhere from Uber. And Uber was like, hey, we like the fact that you have a casino background and a government background. We'd like to recruit you to be part of the team that launches Uber in Las Vegas.
Okay, wow. So you were part of early Uber.
I wouldn't say super early. I was there 2015.
Okay, how many employees did they have at the time?
2,000.
Okay.
Well, we went from 2,000 to like 27,000.
Super fast.
Years, yeah.
100%.
But we call like the OGs, right? The people 2012, 2013.
Got it. Okay, so you said they wanted you to be on the team that launched Uber in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
Tell me about that. How was that?
It was crazy. Right?
Tell me about the crazy, man. Sounds crazy. I mean, now Uber being what it is today, everybody knows what Uber is. But being that time, what year was that?
2015.
2015. It had to be very much different than what we see today. So tell me about it.
Yeah, I think people see Uber as this big automated machine, but back in 2015, a lot of it was done manually, right? So we had to show up and recruit drivers. What's nice is Vegas was a city of third jobs. So Uber was the best third job there was back then, right? Because of the flexibility.
When you say show up and recruit, were you like meet them at restaurants, something like that?
Yeah, we'd actually rent out a ballroom in hotels and just have drivers come through and apply in person, basically. Okay. So we just have like a huge line out through the hotel of people coming to apply.
Okay.
Basically.
So that was a part of your role?
That was a part of our role.
So you're recruiting drivers.
Yep.
And I guess like you're seeing hundreds of thousands of drivers just kind of come through these hotel rooms?
I think we onboarded 200,000 drivers in a month.
In a month?
Yeah.
How big was the team to do that?
12 people. But we also had the systems. Uber had launched in a bunch of cities before then, so we had part humans, part automated systems.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay. What'd you learn during that time at Uber?
I think a couple of things. And we didn't just onboard the drivers, right? So we actually had to strike deals with all the casinos. So, on the strip, there's 50-odd casinos, and we had to strike a deal with every single specific casino for the pickup and drop-off spot.
Okay.
Right? We had to negotiate with the airport the ability to pick up and drop off at the airport. We had to deal with large events, right? So if you think about CES coming to town, and there's 200,000 people all trying to call an Uber with no signal.
Yeah.
Right? And just we had to help lobby the government. It was a very all-encompassing job. And I think that was one of the really cool things about working at Uber was I was 24 years old and I had no idea what I was doing, right? But I think something really stuck with me. It was like my first week of work. And they're like, you need to launch the airport. You need to do a price cut. And I'm like 1 day on the job. I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Right? And they sat me down. They said, look, we have a philosophy. It's really simple. You can make as many mistakes as you like, as long as you have had a reason for them. If you make an uninformed mistake, we'll fire you. basically. So as long as there's a reason for it, go and try it. And that was empowering. That was super liberating.
Yeah.
I also say that was eventually sort of the problems that people talk about Uber was, having a 24-year-old empowered to do whatever they wanted.
Yeah.
If you have a company full of 3,000 24-year-olds doing whatever they want, that ends up being a problem.
For sure. Give me an example of one of those mistakes that you had creative license on, like something that you just kind of, took upon yourself to do that maybe you realized later it wasn't the best idea.
I still think it's a good idea, but
I like that.
I don't regret it.
I like that.
We had a crazy one, right, where we really wanted to launch like a shuttle from the airport. Because if you think about how Las Vegas works is, we have this useless monorail that doesn't connect to any casinos. But most people coming from the airport were going to the same 8 or 9 major casinos, MGM, Caesars, the Wynn, sort of like the Bellagio, the obvious ones.
Yeah.
And at the time, we just launched Uber Pool, and that's a second story. But we really wanted to launch like a Uber shuttle, right? So I think, 10, 15 people in a nice shuttle. So we went to the airport and we're like, hey, we want to launch this shuttle offering.
Right.
Like, you can't do that. Like, why not? And like, well, we run a public bidding process every 5 years for the limo licenses. And to do this, you need a limo license.
Like a medallion.
Yeah.
Okay.
A medallion, but also a medallion with the permission to have the slot at the airport, basically.
Got it. Yeah.
And they were like, when can we do that? Like, well, we, closed the bidding 6 months ago, so 4 years from now, right? And we're like, well, we sort of want to do this. So we sort of wrote up a proposal internally being like, hey, we want to buy a limo company with the permission to do this at the airport. The man, Travis, said, yes, here's $2 million, go buy a limo company. Basically, so we bought a limo company and just started sending the shuttles to the airport.
Okay.
And they started trying to arrest the shuttle drivers. They started calling us saying, you can't do that. I'm like, what do you mean we can't do that? We bought this limo company.
Right.
Now
You
we
went
have
through the proper
license.
channels.
Yeah. And they're like, you can't do that. You can't just buy your license. I'm like, why can't we just buy our license? Right.
Yeah.
Like,
it's like if a bar has a liquor license, you buy the bar, you buy the license too, right?
yeah.
I mean, same logic.
But I think they were used to just like, no, you have to do it through us.
Right.
Basically, right. You have to get our permission to do that.
Okay.
But it was really cool because we hacked Uber Pool, made it so that 10 or 15 people could get on the shuttle. And, it made a lot of sense. It would bounce around the major casinos and pick up and drop off people.
So it worked for a little while.
It did.
Okay, so did they shut it down or what happened? Like when they interjected and said, no, you have to go through us.
They eventually shut it down, but now it's actually a concept that's live in a bunch of different cities for Uber. So I think they shut it down for a year or two, but now it's back in a bunch of different cities, which is pretty cool.
Okay. Yeah. So was that your idea? Or was that like
it was our local city team?
That was you're part of the group that came up with that?
Correct. Yeah.
All right. That's pretty cool.
But that sort of freedom was empowering, right? If you think about it.
For sure.
They were just like, go try it. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, for sure. When you're like you said, you had to lobby government and stuff like that. Like, what does that look like? Like, how much pushback and resistance was there for Uber at that time?
There was quite a bit, right? But I had a manager, and his job would be to deal with the mayor. We'd have lobbyists that we'd work through. But at least from my position, I'd be, I'd deal with the regulator basically, and he'd always have these sort of funny lunches where like, we get lunch, but I can't even pay for his water.
Yeah.
Right? We go for lunch and he's not going to eat. I'm like, he'd literally be like, carve off the 50 cents for the water because I can't pay for the water.
Right.
But, I met for him every month for lunch. We'd throw events for the different politicians. But I think where there was the most pushback was twofold, right? So I think one from the taxis, obviously. Right. And in Vegas, there was always sort of this rumor that the taxis were involved with the mafia. So obviously the taxis were not happy, but actually weirdly the biggest pushback I got was from the front valet, like the folks who valet your car. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. How much do you think like a valet in the front of a casino makes a year?
I'm going to say daily they probably make about a couple $100. I'm going to say probably, if I say 100 times, I'm trying to do some math in my head. Say about 204 times 7 is 1,400. 1,400 times 52. What's 1,400 times 52? Give me that number.
70 grand, something like that.
I'd say about 70, 80 grand.
Yeah. Maybe like 200, 250.
Jesus.
But you're not wrong in that like the salary part of that's like 30 grand.
Yeah.
But what happens is, so I got a phone call from the valet guys at the Wynn. and they're just like, hey, you gotta set up this slush fund and pay us our money. I'm like, what do you mean I gotta set up a slush fund and pay money? I can't do that.
Yeah.
And I realized that, so before Google Maps was such a big thing, let's say you and I were to get drunk and get a taxi in front of the Wynn. We tell the taxi, hey, we want to go to a strip club. If you and I get dropped off at the strip club would pay the taxi driver $60 in cash per guy. And of that $60, 20 of it would get given back to the front valet guy who let the taxi near the front of the line. Basically. So there's this whole system.
Underground racket that's going on that you guys were disturbing.
Yeah. So they're like, you have to pay us our money.
Yeah.
I'm like, dude, I can't do that. Right. So what would happen is they got mad. So anytime an Uber driver broke the rules, cut across the lane, was a little curt with them, they would call me to complain, to send a message. They'd call me at 2 a.m., 4 a.m., 6 a.m., multiple times a night for like a month straight just to send me a message like, give us our money.
Yeah.
Right. And in the end, it got so bad that we actually had to sort of elevate it to the top. And like somebody near the top of Uber ended up calling somebody near the top of the Wynn. Is like, look, we're not going to do this. You got to back off, basically.
Wow.
But that was pretty crazy.
That is crazy.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's some pretty interesting people whose money is involved in that whole situation. So
yeah,
it gets deep.
Yeah.
It gets really deep.
But they were calling me being like, hey, this one guy mouthed off to me. I'm like, why are you calling me at 4:30 in the morning
about
this,
that?
Right?
right. Just BS. These little silly complaints.
Yeah.
Wow. That's super interesting, man. Okay. So you were at Uber for how long?
2 years.
2 years. And what made you leave?
I was young. We had a wild ride. We took the market from zero to a lot, basically.
100%.
And I just wanted to try something else, right?
Okay.
Sort of a young guy, worked at a tech company.
Were you vested?
I vested part of my stock.
Okay.
Right. And from my perspective, I joke I wanted to go to the big leagues. It's like I want to go to San Francisco and see what this is about.
Okay. Got it. So you always had an entrepreneurial mindset, you say?
I think Uber unlocked it for me.
I was going to say, because you studied government, you're
Yeah.
going to kind of get into working, and then you went to Uber and you saw that those guys hustling and just building this business, and they probably were like the catalyst for who you became.
I was like, shit, this is fun.
Yeah.
Right?
Like, I'm going to start something on my own.
Yeah.
Okay. So you leave Uber. What happens next? What do you do after that? That's when you started Para?
No. So I actually joined an early stage startup. It was like a telematics device, actually.
Okay.
So it was like one of those dash cameras. This was back in 2017 that you put in the car, forward collision warning, forward collision warning, distracted driving, texting. Now it's pretty common. Think of like a Samsara or something like
Samsara.
that.
Yep.
So we were trying to compete with them.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So stayed in the transportation lane.
Correct. Yeah.
So it's like you totally shifted away from the whole government thing with this Uber opportunity, and now you're like ingratiated in transportation all of a sudden.
Yeah. And I got the Silicon Valley experience I wanted, but not in a good way.
Right.
So
why do you say that?
So we had a device and we're trying to raise money to make the device better and to sell it, right?
Okay.
And we were trying to raise...
Are we talking about the telematics company?
Telematics company.
Yep.
We were trying to raise like $20 million, and nobody would give us the $20 million because the thing just didn't work. Then suddenly we had one person interested, then two people interested, then multiple funds interested, and then they came to us with a deal saying, we're not going to give you 20, but we'll give you $159 million. Right? It's crazy, right?
What? We're not going to give you 20, but we'll give you 159
just like,
million?
take it to the moon, basically. The investor was like...
So he loved it.
At the time, it was our only option, right? So
Did you have users or anything at this time? Or
we had the number of units sold was like 300, and the main investor was like, how many do you have projected in your best case to sell next year? And I was like, 10,000. And he's like, how much money would it cost to give 1 million of them away for free? We were like, 160 million. He's like, let's do that. Basically.
So was this a time when they were just giving out money?
Yeah. He was also, the guy who led the investment was SoftBank, so they were famous for giving out the money.
Yeah.
And we learned the hard way that when the thing doesn't work and you wanted 20, 159 sounds awesome, but it was a mistake.
Right. Can you explain why that's a mistake?
You lose your focus, right? So
you start buying like hockey pucks and air tables at the office and all this stuff. Like, tell me about that.
We just started hiring people when we weren't ready for it, right? So we went from 20 people to 140 people in a year. They pushed us to launch in Europe and launched in Asia, and the damn thing just didn't work, right? We still had our work cut out for us, right? So we really should have just continued to focus.
Why didn't it work?
I mean, hardware is hard, right? Hardware, and we were doing AI detection on the hardware. And this was back in 2017, so it was sort of like cutting edge technology at the time, and it just needed more reps to get it better.
Got it. So the tech wasn't there yet.
Correct.
Were there any competitors? Like, who were you looking at, like, as a competitor at that time?
It was Samsara. And
Samsara.
Metric.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that's who you were kind of trying to compete with.
Correct.
But you
weirdly,
guys-
we were trying to take that telematics data and actually go to insurance companies and say, hey, because people using this telematics device are safer, can you give them discounts on their commercial auto insurance?
Right.
So that ties into what we're doing with the Gigsafe. So
Got it. Okay. So how long are you with this company, the telematics company?
same thing, 2 years.
2 years. You have a thing for this 2-year thing, man. It's just
I
2 years and
did,
you dash.
right? I did, and I sort of left and thought that I wanted to start a company, right? So that's when I went out and had a couple bad ideas I was fiddling around with,
Okay.
and sort of got introduced to somebody. Someone's like, you should talk to these guys for advice. And I did it. They sort of convinced me to join them. It was sort of like an early stage VC fund, basically. Mm-hmm. So it was sort of me and the two other partners. I sort of dabbled as a VC for a year or two. But, fast forward, COVID happens, started Para, and, Gigsafe is actually still part of Para Inc. So I'm glad I'm not hopping every 2 years now. I've been working on this for 6.5 years, and I hope for the rest of my life.
Yeah. So, how do you know that you're suited to be an entrepreneur?
I don't think there's a knowing that you're doing it. I think you just, working on Para for 5 years and having to shut it down was really hard. But the excitement of working on the new thing far outweighed any sadness of like having to shut down the old thing. And I think that's when I realized that this is what I want to do. Right? It's just like the satisfaction of like chasing something and building it and building the team and doing it. So
yeah.
I mean, how about you? You're an entrepreneur.
It's a good question. I mean, I think there's like different reasons. People have different motivations for entrepreneurship. Some people just like to tinker and they like to just experiment and just see where things kind of take them. Some people have like monetary reasons why they want to be an entrepreneur, which they quickly realize that there's no money in it. It's just, you're just working all the time.
Yeah.
So I was just curious as to like how, because the thing is a lot of people try, people fail, people start, people stop, people start a business and go back to working. So it's like, how do you just know that you're suited to do this and do it and have longevity?
Yeah.
Because one thing to get something started, but it's another to like continuously, like you said, you're going to fail a bunch of times. Yeah. So to continuously be able to be resilient and push forward in these businesses, and you have all these different outcomes, like somebody gives you $150 million and it fails. And then it's like, that could be defeating. Like, man, we had $150 million and we couldn't figure this out. What makes me think we'll be able to figure out the next one?
Yeah.
So I'm just thinking like what inside of you makes you know that regardless of all that, I'm going to still keep on going.
I think you highlighted something right earlier. But before that, I'd get super motivated at a job and leave 2 years later, right? Because to me, it was a job, right? I would buy into the mission. I'd work really hard. But eventually, I'd sort of lose that interest. I wake up every day just feeling blessed to do what I'm doing. So
yeah.
I think that's how I know.
Yeah. I got it. It's in you. It's just in you. All right. Let's get to Gigsafe.
Yeah.
So you start Gigsafe in what year?
This would have been January of last year.
January last year. So a fairly new company.
Yep.
Talk about the team. How do you go about building it?
I was lucky in that I took a lot of the original team from Para.
Okay.
Right. So the engineering team, most of them had worked with me since before I'd actually started Para.
Okay.
Right. And the execs, I brought a bunch of them along with me as well from Para, and ended up hiring a friend to help me with insurance and sort of back office, basically. But I was really lucky in that I got to keep the folks I wanted to from the past company. It was hard though, right? Because for Para, we'd built a team of 35 people. I had to downsize to probably 11 or 12 folks.
Yeah.
So that was hard.
You had to learn from some of those previous mistakes, right? Of being too fat, right?
Yep.
You had to lean up a little bit to kind of get this project started.
Yeah, and I think what I told the team was like, look, everybody who's left here is left here for a reason. We're the A team. Let's go get it, right?
Yeah. Did you start with any investment dollars or did you bootstrap this?
So that's where it gets a little more complicated is we technically had some money left from Para.
Okay.
So I told the Para investors, like, look, I'm shutting down what you invested in, but I'm going to take the money that's left over and we're going to chase this thing that I think is a good idea.
And how was their response to that? Initially?
They were open to it, I think, right? They're like, hey, at the end of the day, we invested in you as a person.
That's right.
If you think this is the right decision, we'll back you.
Okay.
And my deal to them was like, let me prove that this makes sense. And if or when I do, let's come back and figure out what's the appropriate investment, what do we want to do to the company, all of that. Because we raised a bunch of money for Para, right? So if,
How much did you raise?
in total, 15 million.
15? Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. All right. So what was the initial MVP for Gigsafe?
Yeah, so I think
Minimum viable product for anybody who may not know what that means.
yeah, so we worked with a company that was doing pharmaceutical delivery primarily,
Okay.
and they very kindly just agreed to meet with us every 2 weeks.
You had a relationship with them already?
I was starting to build a relationship with them during my time at Para.
Okay.
Yeah, and another thing is a bit of a side story. At some point, we actually started our own pharmaceutical delivery company.
You did?
We did, yeah.
Okay.
Just from an opportunity through Para, somebody asked us if we could help.
All right.
So we're like, well, this seems like good work, but they don't have a management layer, so we'll do it.
And it was an opportunity to get some skin in the game,
Exactly.
right? To understand the actual pain points of who your user is.
Yep. So we stood up a pharmaceutical delivery company based out of, actually, we delivered into Maryland, into Baltimore. We're based out of Hagerstown.
Okay.
And yeah, we had one person on my team, Jimmy. He was in charge of the operation. He did driver onboarding, driver recruiting, driver payments, dispatch, all of it. And what's pretty amazing is him as a one-person team managed to grow the business to roughly $580,000 a year in revenue.
Nice.
And it taught us a lot, right? So we learned the hard way, how do we have to do all of these different individual steps? So for the first company that bought into Gigsafe, we're like, hey, we're going to give you this revenue. We decide we're a software company, not a delivery company. Here's $500,000 on a platter. And they agreed to meet with us every 2 weeks.
Hold
and
on,
help us build the system.
I don't understand that. What do you mean they're going to give them the revenue?
We're just like, hey, here's the contract. You guys can have
You
it.
gave them your contract.
Correct.
And why was that?
You
didn't want it.
We wanted to get out of the game.
So
we wanted
you-
to be a software company. And for when you're building a new company, the best thing somebody can do is just meet with you constantly and tell you what you need to do better. So for me, it was like, let's sacrifice this on the altar of the
That
new
was
thing.
smart.
Yeah.
Did you have like second thoughts about that, or was that like, this is an idea, this is what we're going to do? Like, whose idea was that to do that, to give away a contract to basically who would become your first customer?
I don't have second thoughts, but Jimmy questions it every day. So
Still to this day,
Yeah.
he's like, why the hell did we give away
Yeah.
that $500 a year?
and we have new customers now who are like, dude, why didn't you give it to me? Right?
Right, because that's a heck of a gift, man.
Yeah, and that customer we work with, one, I've become really good friends with him, but we were just in 2 states with them. They had operations in like 46, 45 states.
Wow.
So it has a potential to grow.
And how new was that business? Were they fairly new, or were they kind of in the game already?
He'd been in that game for 12, 13 years.
Okay, so that's just added to his customer base, and he was like, "I'll take it, man. That's great."
Yeah.
And in return, he became your first customer, and
Correct.
you started doing the onboarding and compliance for him.
Correct.
Right? Go ahead.
Yeah, we basically built out, here's the onboarding flow, but there's all these small details that go into this, and that's why I'm thankful to them for meeting with us.
Tell me about it.
You know, yes, you're going in and onboarding with all these different modules, but my team wants to see it this way. I want this team member to be able to see payments, but this team member to be able to process them, but the manager to be able to see them but not hit pay. All these sort of like minutia,
Yeah.
right? And they were the ones who also guided us into, you know, for pharmaceutical delivery, here's the HIPAA training, but certain shippers have their own specific training that they need. And I think they're the ones who also came to us and said, hey, your system's great, but right now it sort of sits in a silo. We have our dispatch app or TMS. Can you get your system to talk to the TMS so that we never dispatch non-compliant drivers, basically? And so they gave us all these sort of nuggets that actually have become sort of something that differentiates us versus anyone else in the market, right? So I think what is Gigsafe unique at? We really, truly automate compliance. We try to maintain every single driver as active for you. So we don't just tell you, hey, Ramel's inactive. We're following up on the company's behalf. And then I think the third part of it is, let's say that no matter what, I reach out to you 40 times and you still don't update your insurance. We go into the TMS and stop you from dispatching him and save you that liability, basically. So there's a couple, it sounds like small things, but no one else is doing this in our market, right? So they gifted us those nuggets.
Okay. So that's how you serve, I guess you'd call that the master contractor, right?
Yeah.
So how are you serving like on the independent contractor side? Like, how do you serve them? Because from that side? Like, what do you do for them? The IC, as you guys call them.
Yeah. So I think a couple things, right? There's like one, most of the companies we're talking with were using other providers, and they're more expensive, right? So I think at the end of the day, let's talk about ICs. Most of them care about dollars in pockets.
100%.
So I can tell you, we provide benefits, which we definitely do. We provide good human support, which we definitely do. We help the ICs get the right insurance. So we can sell pay-as-you-go commercial auto insurance. We can help them get occupational accident. But I think the biggest one that talks to most of them is you now have to pay 30 or 40% less a week in fees. And that's the biggest sell, I'd say, to most of them.
And why is that? Why is those fees? How are they saving all those fees?
So in our final mile part of the world, a lot of the time, drivers are paying fees to work for companies to show their independence. So they'll be paying an admin fee. They'll be paying for their own commercial auto or while under dispatch insurance. A lot of the time, the drivers will be buying their own occupational accident insurance, all of that. And how it's really set up is basically and that's what's interesting in our world is to work for this company, you must have these insurances. And if you don't, you can buy it through our system, basically. But I think that talks to sort of this bigger thing we're seeing in our world, which is shippers are having, basically all this is getting more and more complex. So shippers are having very specific requirements. They're forcing those very specific requirements down onto the delivery companies, forcing those down onto the masters, who are forcing them down to the ICs.
I want to introduce to you guys the Truck and Hustle Entrepreneurs Community, a powerful network built for transportation and logistics entrepreneurs by transportation and logistics entrepreneurs who really get it. Whether you're just getting started or looking to build, grow, and scale, TNHEC gives you the roadmap and resources to make it happen. From business planning to real industry connections, expert insights, and a support system that wants to see you win, we've got you covered. Nah, this isn't another Facebook group. This is Truck and Hustle's first ever official community, and it's designed for your success. So, if you're serious about growing your business in transportation and logistics, now is the time. Join the Truck and Hustle Entrepreneurs community today, and let's build something special and amazing together. Let's go.
Right. So, that's what we're seeing.
Okay. Talking about ICs, there's a lot that's been going around for years in terms of regulation of what's a true independent contractor versus a W-2 worker, right? How does that play into your business? Does it impact your roadmap at all? Just tell me about that, because misclassification. It's a big topic. Just speak to that a little bit, as much as you can.
I think one of the things that frustrates me is I saw this at my time at Uber. It's pretty consistent. We'd survey drivers and 70% of them wanted to be independent. At Para, we had, at the time, a database of 800,000 drivers. We'd survey them. 70 to 80% of them wanted to be independent. So I think we really start with sort of that truth there, and that most of the drivers we know want to be independent. I also know that misclassification is a big thing, and we see that, right? As just because a driver wants to be independent doesn't mean that people aren't abusing that want to be independent.
For sure.
Right? And I think that's sort of the tension that a lot of people don't talk about. Just because somebody's independent doesn't mean they can't be treated better, right? And I think that's really something that we try to really bake into our system, right? So we're actually really proactive with the companies we work with, where, sometimes I'll have a company being like, hey, this guy was rude to me. I'm now going to punish him by not giving him trips. I'm like, whoa, you can't do that, right? So I think we end up helping a lot of the companies we work with actually understand, if drivers are independent contractors, they have certain rights that come with that, and you need to honor those rights. And how can we implement the systems that help with that? On the flip side, who knows where it's all going to go, right? As administrations change, people come and go. It's always been 1099's dead, 1099's not dead, 1099's dead. No matter what happens, I feel like we have a place, because at the end of the day, what do we sell? We sell compliance, right? So if it decides to go more more W-2, we'll be there to help people with that transition. If it goes sort of more 1099, we'll be there to help people with that transition. If it has to get more complex and more layered, we'll be there as the partner. So I guess the way I really view it is, no matter where it all goes, I see that we have an important place there.
I love that. That outlook. What do you think is the reason for the back and forth, right? With the misclassification of workers, why they won't, Uber had a problem with it, right?
Yeah.
why they don't want people to be independent, why they want them to be W-2. How do you see that?
Because I think some of these platforms did take advantage of drivers, right? So I saw that when I was at Uber. When I was there, I used to set these rules. If you don't accept 80% of the jobs we send you, you get deactivated.
Right.
And once you get deactivated, I'll let you back on for 10 or 100 trips, but you better take every single one of them or we're going to kick you off the system. Right? That used to be how we ran the system. But if somebody's an independent contractor, they should be able to accept and decline the work that they want.
For sure.
They should have full visibility on the work that they want. It wasn't until a year or two ago that Uber would actually tell you where the trip is going or what the pay is.
Right. Because once they don't, now they're an employee.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think that's where you see a lot of this tension was like, yes, drivers are ICs, but people didn't honor the rights of being an IC.
Yeah. Yeah. What about the insurance side of it? Because I know, so I have experience with drivers. I owned a driver lease company.
Yeah.
And when we first got started, we onboarded all of our drivers as 1099.
Yeah.
Right. Because it was a way for us in our mind to save money, right? Like let them pay their own taxes. We don't got to take care of no employment costs, no FUTA, no SUTA. Like we had our own workers' comp for our company.
Yep.
But what happened was when we had our workers' comp audit, they basically recognized all of those drivers who we classified them as 1099 or were paying them as 1099 as our employees because of those same things you just now said.
Yep.
We told them where to go. When they worked they were working 40 hours, we were giving them the directive. So it's like, no, these are your guys.
Yep.
And they don't have their own work comp policy, right? So it's like, you have to eat that. So we had to end up eating all those workers' compensation costs.
Yeah.
So
Did you have the whole investigation? They showed up.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. They came like gangbusters, man. They came, they wanted to see all of our payroll.
Yeah.
And in Jersey, it's extremely expensive. It's 20% of every $100. So every $100 with payroll, you have to pay, it's like 18 something percent. Huh. The code is Truckman. So under that Truckman classification code, 18% of all $100 of payroll, you have to pay to workers' comp.
Yeah.
So it just eats into your bottom line like crazy, man.
Do they come just sort of like post up at the office for a couple days?
Well, they come and they just want to look at your payroll, and then basically they're just going to give you a number. They're going to say, okay, well, this is what you told us your payroll was, but this is what it actually was based on all those drivers that you misclassified, and this is what you owe us.
Yeah.
And we had to end up paying a huge workers' compensation nut that we didn't account for because we thought, oh, those guys are 1099, they're good.
Yeah.
You know?
What did you do after that?
We end up having to pay them.
Yeah.
So what we end up doing was we carried that for a couple of years, and we end up rolling into a PEO.
Yeah.
And the PEO was able to absorb that, and then we just were able to be covered under their umbrella policy, and then we were able to take care of everything with workers' comp on a separately.
And you made them sort of W-2 employees on the PEO?
Yes.
Yep.
Now they're under the PEO, so now we're working as like an agent.
Yep.
So to speak. They're not even really employed under us. Yep. We're like an agent. We're telling them where to go, but their actual employer is the PEO, which was good because now they were able to have access to like benefits and different things that we couldn't provide as a small business.
Yep. So I love that analogy because most people don't know what a PEO is, but when they do, that's the easiest way to describe what Gigsafe is. I say we're a PEO for 1099 workers.
Gotcha.
Right. So I know it's not employer of record because it's not an employment agreement, but basically we have a relationship with the 1099 worker. We're able to help them bulk buy the occupational accident insurance, get access to benefits in a way that they otherwise wouldn't, and get the credentials they need to find more work. So if you think about it, we're effectively a PEO.
Yeah, 100%. Because that's another thing that we were looking into, the occupational accident insurance. There are so many different shortcuts that we were trying to take and loopholes just to avoid having to pay workers' compensation because it was so expensive in Jersey.
Yeah.
We tried it all, but that was eventually where we landed, was the PEO model. And that was great because we just paid them like 30%.
Yeah.
And we just had to just make sure we marked up enough to be able to make our little margin on it, you know?
Yep. And I like what you sort of said there, where it's like you as a smaller business and you're not able to negotiate or get the economies of scale or get the pricing on the insurance that you'd want.
Yeah.
And that's really sort of our job sort of as that PEO there, right? Like we help the companies that work with us as well as the drivers that work with us bulk purchase the appropriate insurances.
Yeah. I love it. All right. So tell me, so we started at the, we kind of got off rail a little bit, but we started with that one customer that you started with who you gifted a $500,000 contract.
Yep.
And then you started to build from there. So kind of tell me about how you were able to build the business from there.
Yeah. So we were meeting with them every 2 weeks. And interestingly, because they're a bigger customer, they actually only fully switched to us like 2 weeks ago. So they met with us every
In
2
real
weeks.
time?
Yeah, like 2 weeks ago in real time.
Okay.
So they met with us every 2 weeks for like a year and a half, and then they're like, now we love it, we're switching, basically.
Okay.
So I always say they were the first customer, but our first true customer was really interestingly a flower delivery company. So this guy's a fireman in his full-time job, and he runs a flower delivery company that's tiny 99% of the time during the year, but before, Mother's Day, Valentine's Day, etc., he has a huge delivery company 4 days of the year.
Wow.
Basically.
Wow.
And he was really, truly sort of our first customer there. We helped him onboard the drivers. We helped him pay the drivers. And we sort of really cut our teeth that way. And he's still one of my favorite customers. Shout out to Alliance Delivery.
Okay.
Because he has this awesome business where...
That's cool.
Yeah, he steps away from being a firefighter 4 days a year and makes a bunch of money. So...
That's interesting to me. So the flower delivery, we had somebody on this show the other day. My guy Chip Cox, he runs Floral Trade Distributors. He does flowers, so that's interesting. And then Mother's Day is coming up too.
Yeah.
Tell me about some other like really cool niches. You talked about some earlier. You just talked about the flower, but like different things that people would even think about are out here. That's like different type of these companies that that you would provide services for.
Yeah.
And then tell me some of the different, unique things that you need to do in order to service these companies as like, this compliance provider.
Yeah, so we have a bunch of customers that do catering. So think like, 300 lunches to JP Morgan, basically. And with this, you probably need a SUV up to a Sprinter or box truck because you need sort of a bigger vehicle to be able to do that. You actually need access to a bunch of different hot bags, right? Because if you're delivering 300 lunches, how do you carry that up into the office and keep them warm, right? So we sort of do work with a lot of customers that really specialize in that catering. That's actually sort of because of our time at Para, that was actually one of the most popular jobs that the Para drivers took.
Okay.
Because if you think about it, it's just delivering more food for more money, right?
Right.
So we work with a bunch of those different companies. And what's really cool there is we started to even build a relationship with some of the people who give the work in that world. So for example, there's a company called Easy Cater that actually people go and order the food with, and they're the ones that give the work to the delivery companies. So what will happen is Easy Cater will sometimes change their requirements. So they'll basically say, hey, anyone who does work with us needs to have occupational accident insurance for the drivers. We're seeing that more and more is actually that mandate is coming down from above. And they'll also now say, you also need $2 million in umbrella and hire a non-owned policy.
Right.
But now it's sort of nicely, they'll give us a heads up so we can work with the delivery companies that work with them to be able to ensure that they meet those requirements. And I think that's sort of an interesting anecdote for what we're seeing more and more in our world is really the people giving the work are starting to mandate stuff downwards.
Yeah. That's pretty interesting. How much does location impact the business? Like where somebody's based?
From our end, we work in almost every state at this point.
Okay.
I would say. I mean, there's some states that are a little trickier. I think, California, Washington, etc.
And why are they tricky?
Because I think the standard for being an IC is a lot higher there. So I think we are very selective with the companies we work with in those states because we only want to work with folks that are truly treating the drivers as independent contractors.
Okay.
Yeah. But sort of like the other verticals you're saying, we do like I'm trying to think what else is interesting on our. We do a lot of pharmaceutical and life science.
Okay.
So this is people
like organs and stuff.
Yeah, starting from like hey, here's just a prescription going to somebody's house. We do hospice.
Oh wow.
And it's really funny because what's a good percentage on time in the trucking world you're from?
98%, 97%. That would be considered good.
Yeah. I remember when we started doing that work, the guy sat me down and was like, you have to deliver 100. I'm like, sure. It
doesn't exist.
Everybody says that.
Right,
He goes,
right.
but let me put it this way. He goes, if you miss the delivery, that lady's going to die in pain tonight.
You're incentivized.
Yeah.
Damn.
Right? He's just like, you mess it up, somebody's going to die in pain.
Wow.
Like, that sucks.
That's
Right? The bar is high.
man, that's a hell of a
Right?
high
Yeah.
bar right there. When somebody tells you that, it's like, all right, let me get my ass in the truck.
Yeah. And in that world too, we'd be dealing with narcotics, right? So I think in that world also, like you just cannot lose a narcotic, right? So when we were doing our own delivery company, we had a driver passed out from heat stroke, and ambulance took her away. Now we
Wow.
had her car sitting on the side of the highway with,
Narcotics.
300 scripts of narcotics.
Oh
right?
my goodness. Wow.
So our dispatcher had to go run and get the car and sort of save all the goods. But to do that sort of work, there's a lot of requirements. I know HIPAA training, bloodborne pathogen training. We're starting to see people start to deliver like radioactive compound drugs, right, for cancer patients.
Yeah.
We're starting to see a lot of like life science tests coming out. So, they're testing some new vaccine. They need to send a frozen vaccine syringe to thousands of houses, or they need to collect blood work back from all these people. So this is actually being sort of one of the big growth verticals in Final Mile. There's very specific life science, pharmaceutical, hospital at home work. And that's booming right now.
Oh, wow.
And that's great for us too, because there's just lots of requirements for that.
Right.
RADAC training, hazmat training, dry ice training. A lot of these folks have their own specific trainings too. So to do work for Markin, you have to do Markin training.
Yeah.
Right. So when I call about the sort of professionalization, as you said earlier, organs, right? If, God forbid, I die on the side of the highway and they want to take my organs to transplant to somebody else, that's a 1099 driver doing that.
Wow. That's interesting. What out of all those that you just now named, what is the most like profit? Like, what's the most lucrative one like that people can make? Because there's always people looking, like there's hustlers that watch this channel. So if there's like a niche that you would say get into where you can make a lot of money for making these deliveries, what would you say they were? Give me like top 3.
Sprinter van or box truck in general. Sprinter van or box truck in, I'd say, pharmaceutical and life science.
Pharmaceutical and life science.
Those companies, like local or regional companies.
How would you find them?
Email me. But, I think if you look online, right, I think it's actually become pretty hot. So you'll see there's actually YouTube videos about it. There's actually posts about it. It's sort of been hot for a little bit here.
Yeah. So it's real. Well, they say like as soon as like everybody's talking about it, it's too late.
Yeah.
So like what's the
But
one that's on the horizon?
I think the growth is already happening. I think the growth is outpacing people's interest in it, right? Think about it. Like we're seeing this like hospital at home is really a thing now, right? So that's this new wave that's coming too, is people want to be treated at their house. The end of life patients want to be treated at their house. They need IV bags. They need durable medical equipment. They need gauze, right? They need medicine sent to them. So if anything, I think if I were to pick a niche, that would be the one I would spend the next couple of years in, especially if you can sort of flex up and get a slightly larger vehicle.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I love it. When you talk about all these different trainings, how do you keep track of all that? Like, how is that done? Are you like administering that through like a third party, or like how does that work?
We started off doing that, right? So we'd had customers would say, hey, send them out to this third party website. And I'm almost a little bit like obsessive with sort of our funnel. Right, like how much do we convert for our customers? Because that's one of the main things we deliver. And what I'd find was, surprisingly, when there's a link saying, hey, leave the onboarding flow, go to this random web page, go to the cart, enter a discount code, take the training, download the PDF, and then come back and upload it, everybody disappeared.
For sure.
So I think that was really that moment for us being like, hey, we should start to just bring that in-house, right? So we've built almost like a learning management system that sits within our system. And really taking a step back, I say PEO, but the other thing I really talk about is being the system of record. So like all these specific credentials, we shouldn't say trainings because independent contractors, but those should live within our system, right? It's not just the ID and the insurance and the vehicle registration, but do they have the qualifications to do those specific jobs? And then we also plug into the dispatch system and say, hey, Ramel's HIPAA is now expired, so he technically can't deliver organs until he does it again. Basically.
Okay. So you guys are administering the test, the actual training, for the most part?
We have a third party who creates the actual, but it lives in our system.
Because you'd have to get some sort of certification to be able to do that yourself, right? That would be like a whole nother layer?
Weirdly, what I found out is not. So I thought you'd have to have some governing board to do HIPAA or to do TSA training. There's one company for Root that does all the TSA training. I went to TSA and said, hey, what does one need to make TSA training? And they're like, do I need your permission? They're like, no. Like, what do you mean?
Just need a physical address.
Yeah. They're like, you just have to be okay with us suing. You have to be okay in the court of law defending that what you have meets our requirements. But technically anyone can create a credential or a training. It's sort of crazy, actually. There is no standard. The standard is if you get sued over it, can you defend what you have?
Which is probably why not a lot of people do it.
Correct.
Because that's a big undertaking.
Correct. But I think that's also sort of our advantage there is can you take HIPAA, HIPAA is a very broad, it's not fun to watch the video.
Right.
Drivers only need to know the correct angle on it. Right. So that's really what we're trying to do is like.
What applies to them.
Exactly. Like in your doing of this job, what can we do to give you everything you need to do it well? But you don't need to understand how the pharmacy deals with it, right? So really, that sort of, I view it as like something we want to lean into, actually.
That's a good point, because I think a lot of training is just overwhelming.
Yeah.
Right. Like I mean, it's good to understand things holistically, like at a bird's eye view, like to understand how everything works, but it can take away from what you really need to know.
Yeah. I don't know about you, but you just hit play.
Yeah, you just keep exactly. Right? You just like moving on. All right, answer the question. Right.
Here's a quiz. I fail it. Now I know what the right answer is. Right.
It's kind of a joke in some cases, right? So that needs to be. Like they need to change that because this is stuff that people really actually need to know. So if you don't make the process a little bit more relevant, it's a problem.
And we're just sort of making it scrolling, quick quizzes, quick bites. Just like, how can I teach you what you need in like 7 minutes, not 70 minutes?
Right. Okay, cool. So just at high level, because we talked about a lot of different things, what is everything that Gigsafe is doing for the master contractor, or however you want to, identify this person as? Would you call him what would you identify your ICP?
I'd say up until this point, it's been the delivery company.
The delivery company,
right? So for us, it's been the delivery company itself. I'd say most of the delivery companies we work with have somewhere from 50 to a couple thousand drivers.
Okay.
But what we've started to be asked for is more tools to help that master contractor. I have a question for you. Like, where do you think that line between a master contractor or a delivery company is?
The line? When you say the line, what do you mean by the line?
When does a master become a delivery company?
When they get the contract directly.
Okay.
So a master, I look at as somebody who has the contract.
Yeah.
Who has the work.
Yeah.
And then that master is going to allocate that work either to themselves or they're going to outsource that to other people.
Yep. I think that makes sense. And also once they hit some certain size, because I've seen these masters,
For sure.
You have 100 folks underneath you. At that point, I know you don't have the direct contract, but you're a delivery company in my eyes at that point.
Right. 100%. 100%.
So for me, it's like building the tools we have right now for the masters. That's really sort of a big push we're doing right now. And we're launching it the first week of June, is just making it really easy for masters who, have 1 to 20 folks to be able to onboard those folks in our system and to be able to share the information they want to with the delivery companies they work with. So these delivery companies have come to us, and it all starts, I keep saying it starts with the shippers, but the shippers say, hey, I want to know that the delivery company is compliant. I want to know that the master is compliant, and I want to know that the person underneath the master is compliant. Right? So we're building out a systems so that you can have that end-to-end visibility, but the master is still in control. So the master can decide, I want to share some information with the carrier, or I don't.
So this is a shared dashboard? How does this work? Like when you say share?
Yeah, so the master can basically say, hey, I do work for these 5 delivery companies. These delivery companies are requesting that I share some insight into the compliance of my drivers.
Yeah.
I can decide how much I want to share.
Like drug testing and all these things, so they can go see it on their side.
Yeah, we have sort of 2 options. We basically say, hey, you can share everything. We have something, and what we've heard is people want it very different ways. You can share all the information. So here's Ramel, here's his phone number. He's compliant on these 7 steps. Or the other ones, you can just share a green check mark. So we'll basically share back saying, we know your requirements, delivery company, and everyone at Ramel's Delivery Co. meets them with a green check. But you don't need to know anything else, basically.
Got it.
But what's
you
cool
guys
is,
are ensuring that that's the truth.
Correct. And if the master doesn't have the requirements for the shipper or for the carrier that they work with, the delivery company they work with, we can help patch that. So we're saying, hey, to do work for this specific delivery company you're trying to do work for, you actually need cargo insurance, and we can help you get that.
Okay. So at what point in the process do you realize that? Like, is there like a notification or something, like when they onboard the driver or they connect with this shipper, they're like, oh, like there's a notification sent to you guys, like, that's not going to work because this type of work, and it just like flags Gigsafe. Is that how it works?
Because they're all in the system for us. It'd be like, this delivery company wants to work with you, Ramel.
Right, because it's a two-sided marketplace.
Yep. And they'll be like, these are their set of requirements. They got 9 requirements. We know that you only meet 7 of the requirements. We can help you patch those 2.
Okay.
And that goes back to that sort of earlier vision I said earlier, is how can I just make it easy for people to be able to discover and do the work that they want to.
And typically, what are those type of things that will be the patch?
A lot of it will be either specific trainings or credentials, or it will be around insurance. right? So to do this, you need a $3 million umbrella, not a $2 million umbrella. We actually have cargo insurance that we require you to get, et cetera.
Okay.
So a lot of the time, a lot of it would come down to insurance, actually.
Got it. And you guys already have those relationships in place because there's already other people in the system that are already doing those same contracts.
Correct. Yep. And I think over time, we want to make it easy for masters to be able to discover other carriers or other delivery companies to be able to do the work for.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. On the IC side, how is give me like the journey? Like, what do they have to do, if anything? Are they just uploading the license and they're done, or what's their responsibility?
So a lot of time right now, they'll go to a website or to Indeed. So take a customer of ours, Airspace, right? So they're like an air freight company.
Okay.
If you just say, hey, I want to apply to be a 1099 contractor with Airspace, you sort of go to their website, click on the link, and you can sort of decide what city you want to be in. And when you click it, it goes to the Gigsafe Experience. It's a web app, and it says, hey, here's the 9 things you need or 7 things you need to onboard with Airspace. It's going to take 10 to 12 minutes. Each step will take roughly this much. Let's go through it, right? And we work with companies to set that up in the best way. So we actually have a library of like 29 or 30 different onboarding modules, and that's always growing. What I meant earlier, it can be anywhere from HIPAA to prove that you have the right insurance to who's going to get the money if you die, right? To sign the document. We have all these different steps depending on what a customer needs. But really, our goal for the driver is if you're a motivated driver that's a right fit, you can onboard in 12 minutes, basically. And after that, a lot of it's driven by text and by email. So every time you get paid, you get a text or email with your invoice. You can log into our invoice system, and we also have a suite of benefits for the contractors as well.
Okay, now this includes like background checks. This includes like, what does this all include? Because, there's multiple different levels of background checks that you guys have to do. You have to run all these. So like, how does that work?
Yeah, we'll do DOT number, motor carrier number. We have all the different background checks. Like each company can set up their grid of what they're looking for.
What they need.
Yeah.
So you're running like the motor vehicle record, the MVR.
Yep.
You're running background checks.
Yep. They can decide if it's state level, federal level, how far
they have their own parameters set. Correct. What about drug testing?
We do drug testing too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you do
all of this is through a third party? I think one of the things that's important is there's things that we want to be good at, and providing the unified system of records what we want to be good at.
Yep.
I'm never going to be the best ID scanning company in the world. There already exists one. I'm never going to be the best background check company or drug test company in the world. There already exists one. But my goal is to take the best ones, build the ones that there aren't the best ones in, and stitch it together, right? So in our case, we work with, a yardstick for our background checks.
Yep.
And we, have access to the other providers as well. We work with like a Persona for our ID scan. We work with DocuSign for signing the documents.
Yep.
But sort of our magic is stitching it all together.
I love it. And then you guys are obviously tracking all expiring items and so forth, and sending notifications when that happens.
Correct. Yes, you have a combination of it's automated, and also you have sort of our team members who will reach out as well.
What was happening before you came along, and what were like some of the major holes that you saw that that makes you guys viable?
Yeah, I think the big one was existing systems were too clunky for the modern driver. Right. So if you were a company that's growing quickly and you needed to onboard, hundreds, if not thousands of drivers in different cities, the existing tools just took too long, right? It took weeks to onboard. I always say, hey, you can onboard in 12 minutes, but a background check takes a day or two. The review process takes a day or two. But from my perspective, it should take days, not weeks. Right. So I think that was a big opportunity for us there. And I think, that was where we had our whole opportunity against existing systems, but also for a lot of these companies, they were just doing pen and paper, right? So it's just somebody in the office was doing this on maybe a Google sheet, but likely pen and paper. So
it's pretty surprising that still happens.
Yes. I think, compared to trucking, the final mile is still sort of the Wild West a little bit, right? Trucking's much more regulated.
It is.
Right.
It is, but it's still very antiquated. I mean, there still is a lot of manual that goes into it. For some reason...
you have this beautiful FMCSA where you can go in and actually see the profile on anybody. We don't have that, right? No.
There's no safer for final mile.
For people who are in the box trucks, for some who need to have a safer profile, it's there, but there's no safer for the final mile.
Why?
But I think at the end of the day, it's a government regulation thing. I'm not a person who likes government regulation, but I think really it exists because the government said you have to have it.
Yeah. I mean, I think at a high level, I think it's good. I mean, obviously, transparency to some extent is good, especially with all the fraud that goes on in the industry. You need to be able to say, hey, this guy is an actual motor carrier.
Yeah.
Here they are. So, I mean, you need that.
Yeah. And I think somebody needs to do that, right?
I was just going to say, like, why hasn't anybody done that?
Yeah.
That's weird.
Give me a couple months.
So I guess really because, you guys are under 26,000 pounds, you don't have the same regulations as a CDL requirements and so forth. So it just falls.
There's just no mandate. And
there's no mandate.
The people who are forcing the mandates in our world are either the owners of the companies or the people giving the work, the shippers. And what we just see is the people who are giving the mandates are mostly the shippers.
Wow.
But it's like an opt-in mandate. It's like, and it's from their perspective, it's more covering their ass.
Yeah.
Right? Because they know sort of if there's a crash, eventually they're the biggest dog, so it gets up to them. But yeah, somebody needs to be able to say for final mile.
That is very interesting that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
That's a huge opportunity, man. Well, like you said, you probably haven't done it in a couple of weeks. It won't take you long.
Focus and not yet, but I think we're doing it on a micro level, right? So if a company works with us, they meet a certain safety requirement. Right.
You're already building it.
Yeah.
You're building all the data points for it. It's just a matter of packaging it as the safer, but you know what I mean? You're already really building it.
Yeah. And I think you're already starting to see part of that too, is like, hey, if a company in our system works with a company in our system, they know they both meet a certain threshold of requirements, basically. Right.
And that's the key.
Yeah.
That trust.
Yep.
Right. Because you guys they're both on a platform. So there's a trust factor there. Like, okay, we can trust that this is.
Because I think actually for the final mile, and I'd love your thoughts on this, I look to trucking and I'm like, there's so many interesting things that have been done or that are just, highway or something like that with the profile, safer. Like there's a bunch of these concepts that just make sense for our part of the world.
Yeah.
That just don't exist.
Yeah. There really is.
Yeah.
I think it's very, there's definitely like they translate very easily. Like it's just a matter of just like, it's almost like if we were to take all the things that we built in the U.S. and take it to Africa, and like just like in a place that's just a little bit less civilized, and like build all the same businesses there.
Yeah.
Because there's just so much opportunity, just a little bit further ahead.
Yeah.
It's like the same type of deal. Like it's just a little bit further ahead, so you could take the same concepts and build it in a final mile space.
Every time I think, why hasn't somebody done this in final mile? I look to trucking and there's like 3 companies doing it.
Yeah.
Basically. The problem is in final mile, y'all have more margins than we do. So I think that's the thing is I go back to highway because somebody brought this to my attention recently, and I don't know how much it costs, but you have to pay to subscribe to have a profile. Is like in our part of the world, the margin's less, the amounts are less, so it's harder. But yeah, a lot of the trucking concepts will finally make their way here, I think.
Yeah, I love that. That's pretty interesting. Yeah, I do hear that a lot, that the margins are like very, very slim in the final mile space. It's more of a volume game.
Yeah.
So that's interesting, man. Okay, what haven't you told me about Gigsafe that we didn't uncover, man? Because I'm loving it. Talk to me. What's another feature or something that I didn't ask you about?
Over time, I want to, final miles our focus for the next couple of years, but we have a couple other, you asked earlier about different industries.
Yeah.
We have like 2 independent film crew companies that use our system.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, so folks who film ads, film movies, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And weirdly, their compliance is off the charts harder than the delivery companies.
Tell me about it. Did they find you or you found them?
They found us, and I think what I've always said is like, hey, our system works for you. I'm happy. I'm also sorry that I can't give you the love and attention that you want because I'm busy building for final mile. So if it happens to meet your needs, great. They need occupational accident, they need background checks. Yeah. But I was shocked. One of these companies needed to go do ads for Google, so they had to get on Google Campus. The background check for Google was crazy.
I could imagine.
Right, I had to call all their universities to make sure that they actually got their degrees. We had to look on a bunch of not just the usual terror watch list, but the Iran sanction list. The background check was 3 times as heavy as anything else we'd ever run into.
Yeah.
And we're starting to talk to people who have landmen companies, so people who go and try to buy land with oil, or they go to the courthouse. We also have a bunch of delivery companies that do process serving.
Okay.
So you've been served.
Yeah.
You never thought about it, but they need to have commercial auto insurance, occupational accident insurance when somebody punches them for trying to serve them, right? All of that sort of stuff, right?
Yeah.
So we just sort of see this. I know some of the original stuff we talked about, the merchandising. We're just, over time, I'd love to be able to help those customers more too, because I just view it as, at the end of the day, if we're the system of record, these are just different modules. Yeah. Right. So I know you talked about eventually we might poke our head over, into the trucking world is like over time, I'm trying to build a system where you can credential it modularly for anything that you want over time.
Yeah, yeah. What do you think that roadmap looks like? How long do you think it'll take you to build something like that?
I don't know, for at least the next year or two, we're only doing final mile, and I call it going up and down the chain, right? So we're trying to build more relationships with the shippers and trying to build more relationships with the masters and the ICs, because I think I just want to be the person that can verify and help patch that entire chain.
Yeah. What has been the biggest challenge in building this business? Because we've talked about a lot of, optimism and everything's good and great and you're connecting all these pieces, but what has been difficult?
I think I was naive at the beginning of it, thinking that we'd just show up. And I went to the conference and I thought, this is the sales pitch. We're cheaper, we're faster, we're better, buy the software. That didn't work.
Yeah.
I think, relationships are really important in this industry. So I think that's something I had to learn the hard way. I'm also not up until recently, I was the only salesperson at the company, and I'm not naturally a salesperson. So I think I had to learn some things the hard way there, but really relationships were key. I'm an impatient person. So I think really what I ended up doing there was, for the last year, I probably spent 3 out of every 4 weeks on the road, seeing prospective customers, going to visit people's warehouses, going to see their operation, just like pretty much seeing anybody who would see me.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that's something that was a challenge, and it's something that I continue to try and do, is to win people's trust, to build those relationships, because I think that's really important here.
And what is that taught you? Like, what is like the biggest takeaway from all this time that you spent with your customers? If you could narrow it down to a concept, a thought, a sentence.
And people want to do business with people that they trust. And I think I really put it this way. We have a customer called OTD Florida, right? And what's really cool with them is they do Florida to Florida delivery only. They compete with FedEx and UPS.
Okay.
And I sort of went to visit their office, and what's really cool is that, Jesse, who's the president, you have the CEO, who's his dad, then you have the granddad in the office. And I remember going to visit them, and it was one of the hardest questions I had, where the granddad was like, we've been in business for 42 years. We don't switch partners lightly. How do I know I'll be doing business with you for the next 42 years? And he's like, at that point, I'll be dead, but how do I know my grandson will do business with you for the next 42 years?
That's right.
Right.
What'd you tell him?
I mean, I think I was basically like, there's nothing I can do to convince you that, but I think you need to build trust.
Right.
I'm going to earn that trust from you all every day, and hopefully I can keep earning it for 42 years.
But that gave you like a North Star, like, yeah, that's how I have to look at this business.
And I think people worry. I mean, at the end of the day, switching your system of record is difficult. Working together is difficult. People want to know that we're going to be here for a while, because, I probably don't do myself any favors. This world is full of Silicon Valley tech guys who showed up with a hot idea, then disappeared a year or two later and burned the people who gave them that chance or that trust.
Yeah.
So I think especially in our world, there's a lot of hesitancy around like, why should I switch to you? Because you might not be around next year.
That's right.
Right.
Because it takes a lot to switch.
Yeah.
And people don't want to, you have to transfer everything over from what you've been doing. It's like, that's a big jump, a big
and I
lift.
think it's fair, right? A lot of these companies aren't around 2 years later, 4 years later,
that's
6
for
years
sure.
later, right? So I think that's a hurdle I've had to overcome. I think 1, by just being like, I'm here to stay. 2, building the right system. And 3, we sort of luckily recently closed a fundraising round as well.
Yeah.
Right. So we're able to start to close an additional $4.75 million and be able to tell people like, look, I'm here to stay.
Right.
Right. I also think we have to build the business the right way, right? So we're close to being profitable there too, which means we're default alive as well.
Yep.
So I think there's that, but at the end of the day, it goes back to relationships.
Is there an AI component to Gigsafe? And
There's like a light version of it.
A light version?
Right?
What does it do?
So we have the AI that sort of approves the driver's license.
Yep.
Right. So if it's expired, it'll reject it when you scan it. That's through Persona,
Okay.
third party.
Yep.
It's the same one DoorDash uses.
Okay.
But we have some internally, right? So if a couple of things, we have a lot of vehicle insurances, vehicle declaration pages. We know AI is not perfect yet, so we use AI through Google Cloud, and we extract a lot of the information automatically from those documents, but we have a human approving it.
Has to go manually check it.
So all of it's auto-approved, but at the end of the day, it's a human who's looking at it and making sure that it's right and correcting if it needs be.
Got it.
Where I think is really interesting is I'm seeing more and more of this is like, when you had your companies, like, did you ever have to prove like, here's a certificate of insurance, or like, here's not even that, like, here's my full policy?
Yeah.
And it's crazy. It's like, here's like 60 pages. You think you understand it, but what says on page 3, 10, and 30 is modified on a sub-bullet on page 40, 2.b.
Right.
And what I'm really excited about is we're starting to see a lot of these AI tools that can sort of parse that and tell you what all the key terms are.
Yeah.
Basically. And that's important to us because at the end of the day, it's our job to make sure what's said in those 40 pages meets the requirement of, the person higher up the food chain that's looking for that.
Yeah.
So I think that's really our philosophy there. Is like at the end of the day, we're never going to truly automate it with AI, but how can I make it much faster for a human to review it?
Right. And I think it's important that it's never fully automated because you need that manual human touch at some point, right? Just for that verification, that truth.
Yeah.
But it's interesting you said that with like the contracts. I use AI now. I use ChatGPT to like read over contracts regularly. I'll just like upload a contract and say, hey, tell me the important parts of this contract, break it down, bullet points, and just kind of give me what you think about it. And it'll just read it. And it's just like the free version of ChatGPT.
I do that all the time too, where I'm like, hey, tell me if there's anything I should be worried about, right?
Right. You talk to it like your like CFO or like your friend or like your buddy, right? Like your mentor. Like give me some choices, and it breaks it down in 2 minutes exactly what you should be thinking about. So it's definitely there. So it's definitely interesting where it'll take that.
Yeah. It's funny. I used one of our team members had this other. We had a driver who was upset with one of our customers and sent in like a 60-page essay on why he was upset with the customer.
Yeah.
And I think our support team was like, "Can you please summarize this into half a page so I understand what he's angry about?"
Not only summarize it, but then respond to it too.
Yeah.
Do all the work for you, man. It's crazy. Yeah. All right, man. Cool. So, I think we're kind of coming to a wrap. I feel like we got a good idea of what Gigsafe can do, what it will do for this industry. Really incredible what you built in such a short amount of time, but you've really been building this for years.
Yeah.
Right. That's the one thing I think that's important to really kind of like you've been in business with Gigsafe for a year, but this has been a process for many years that you've been building Gigsafe, but now you finally arrived at this tool.
Yeah. So like every piece of my career has come to this point. Uber, the telematics company talking to the insurance companies.
That's it.
I guess even the time at VC, I learned how to raise money, and then Paros is like everything I've done since I was 23 has really led me to this point.
100%. And that's as I kind of hit like, let's think about the story. It's like, man, like this. That's why I said that. Like it's a year old, but you've been building this for since you were 20.
Yeah.
So now we're here, man. All right. So traditionally, before we get out of here, number one, we got to let everybody know where they connect with you and learn more about yourself if they want to connect with you directly, and then learn more about Gigsafe. Yeah. And then we have to leave with a final thought, which is basically what you want to leave for like the entrepreneurs and the wanderers and the people out there building businesses. Just just a little bit of encouragement, if you will. So let's start with where people can learn more about you and learn more about Gigsafe.
Feel free to reach out to me. It's david@gigsafe.com. Shoot me an email. I'd love to hear from you. If you want to learn more, also just go to the website, gigsafe.com. But really, message me. I'd love to hop on a call. So.
Okay, sounds great. And your final thought, what do you want to leave the audience with?
Jump in and don't give up. Jump in
and don't give up.
Yeah. I go back to that sort of shutting down the business after 5 years. It was painful, but, it was the right thing, right? So I think it's one of those where, just keep trying.
Would you say that was your biggest loss in your professional career? Having to shut down that para?
Yes, but maybe I'm like naively optimistic, whereas like for me, I very quickly turned that into the best thing because I was like, I have the learnings and I now know what I need to do.
Yeah.
Right. So maybe I'm also naively optimistic.
Do you have something that you'd say was a loss in your career, in your entrepreneurial career?
I turn everything into a learning, but there's definitely been a ton of losses. Right. Like I think I turn it into a learning, and I think a loss is only a loss if you don't learn from it. Right. And maybe that should have been what my advice should have been. Maybe.
I think you just gave it.
Yeah.
I digged a little bit deeper, and I got some more wisdom from you, man.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. David, man, this has been amazing. I thank you so much for coming out here and teaching us, well, not teaching us, but telling us more about Gigsafe and what you guys are building for the final mile industry. I look forward to your growth and just watching you just take the final mile world by storm, man, and then maybe dipping into the trucking world too. So we'll see how that goes.
Hey, I'm excited for that.
Yes, sir, man. Thank you for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Hustle fam, you know what we do around this time. If you smell something burning, it's only a desire. Myself, Mr. David PICKERELL, CEO of Gigsafe, we are out.
All right, y'all, listen, I'm happy to announce that we finally launched our YouTube memberships. Listen, if you want to support Truck and Hustle for all the hard work that we've been doing over the past 5 years, this is where you need to be. As a part of our memberships, number one, you'll get exclusive access to all of our archive content. Number two, we'll be doing at least one live webinar with one of the guests or somebody else from our network that you love to continue to add value to you and your business. Third, we'll be having exclusive behind the scenes content that we shoot and doesn't, make the final cut. So make sure you go check it out. Get that subscription right now and join us, man. TNH forever. Let's go. All right, guys, if you love Truck and Hustle and you love the interviews and the information that we're providing week to week, make sure you like, share, and subscribe to the channel. All right, Hustle fam.